What's up, guys? Today is a follow-up to the episode I did where we talked about fighting with your physique, and today is going to be a comprehensive overview of what you can do if you are the taller, leaner fighter. The last in-depth episode was looking at shorter, stockier fighters. Those are the guys that myself, the taller guys for our weight class, I'm 5'11" at 145 pounds, those are the guys that I need to know how to fight. Because obviously, as I explained in that last episode, I don't want to be fighting at this range here where they can let their hands go and utilize their power. Because since they're shorter and stockier, they should have more strength. So today, guys, I have 8 points for you if you want to become a more effective fighter with a tall, lanky build. Alright guys, today we're talking about the fighters who have the height advantage. Now a lot of times people go, oh, they have the height advantage, they have everything going for them. But keep in mind, and this is something I've noticed throughout my career, is people get shorter, they have bigger muscles. That's generally the difference. When they have bigger muscles, a lot of times that means they're going to hit harder. So we need to be smart. We need to make sure we're not fighting at a specific zone that isn't in our best interest. Now, when we start thinking of tall fighters, off the top of my head, some of the most effective ones in the world include Israel Adesanya, very tall for his weight class. Sean O'Malley, also very tall for 135 pounds. If we move over to Bellator, we have guys like Michael Page. The guy who comes to mind the most for me when I think of tall, long fighters is Tommy Hearns, the Hitman. He fought so many of those classic battles back in the 80s. His arms were way down to his knees, but the height he had was just so much more than everybody, and he utilized it so well. So we'll be taking a few notes from him today as well. Now guys, there are probably so many videos out there talking about what to do if you're the taller, leaner fighter. I want to give you my opinion, and I don't want to go through all the normal bullet points. And the first thing I want to talk about is footwork, but that's being killed to death. I want to talk specifically about what you need to get very good at in footwork. Like obviously you can bounce around, you can move, all that, but the most important thing for the taller fighter is being able to get out of range very quickly. So you'll see many people, especially in MMA, the longer fighters, let's say I'm just moving around with my hands down, maybe like Adesanya, I'm moving here, I'm at this range. As soon as they move into me, I need to be able to move back to maintain that range. It's not always about the ability to explode forward, because you should be able a lot of times just to walk. You can just sit out here, maintain that range, and then you just need minor adjustments, because the other fighter is trying to always get a way in. Your job is more to keep them at range and then get very good at moving back, maybe cut a little angle if necessary. But if I was going to say there's one type of footwork you need to get good at, it's backpedaling. So many of the guys in UFC, so many of the top fighters, guys like Tommy Hearns, you know, he'd back up, and then he'd sort of do the little shuffle where he'd move from side to side, but very often backing up, getting that space, getting back to that point where he can start initiating his jab just outside of range and then take the small step for the big shot. This is an error that I have made in my career. I never really worked on backing up. I always went, okay, I stand right in this zone. If somebody comes to me, I just plant. And I spent one camp in particular trying to work backing up. But when you've spent your whole life essentially just learning to plant, it didn't really take in the fight. It's something that I wish I would have worked on a lot earlier in my career. You know, throw the shots. As soon as I see them move, just back up, instead of my normal thing, which is they come to me and I just go here and then I work on counters. For the taller fighter like myself, it is not the smartest way to compete against shorter guys. So hopefully the mistake that I noted myself will help you guys make those corrections and get better if you are the taller, leaner fighter. From here, guys, I want to talk about something else that I have noticed in my career, and which I'm guilty of very often. It is not engaging in brawls. I definitely do this. I definitely unnecessarily do this. I'll be at this range right here. I could easily just put my hand out, step back, and get back to that nice long distance. But as soon as somebody gets in here, I'm happy to sit and bang with them. And I always go after. Why did I do that? I'm the longer fighter. I shouldn't be putting myself in that danger zone where the shorter fighter wants to be. It's definitely something you can do once in a while, especially if you're outclassing the guy. But when you have a battle, a fight where the two of you are neck and neck, it's probably unwise to do. I was fortunate that I won most of my fights in this situation, but I had one. The one massive legit loss that I took in my career was because I fought Robin van Roosmalen. He was down here. I was up here. I tried to maintain range for a little bit, and then I kind of gave up on it. And I just went, okay, you know what? I'm just going to get in here and bang with him. That was a mistake. It was unnecessary. If you do your training correctly, you utilize all the points we're going to talk about today, hopefully you can avoid the brawl. Our next point, guys, is learn to maximize your power on your longest shots. Again, something I've been guilty of not really putting a focus on in my career. The best punch I've had, the punch that I've worked over and over and over, is the left body hook and the left head hook, both of which are going to require me to bend my elbow, which means they're not the longest shots. I should have been more focused on throwing my cross, because that's a power shot, something like Deontay Wilder does. He is a very tall fighter as well for his weight class, and he has his cross so scary and so on point, but again, maintaining that his best punch is a long punch. So if I was going to give you guys techniques to work on as the longer fighter and said these are the ones that you really want to get good at, it is not the uppercut, it is not the hook, it's going to be out here, the jab, the cross, the front kicks, and then maybe for closing distance very fast and maintaining range, a nice long knee. Because a nice long knee, if somebody comes to throw a hook at me, they're throwing their body in and I can land that long knee as they approach. That's devastating for them. So the straight punches, the front kicks, and the long knees. These are the techniques that are very, very important to get proficient at in your power. You want that power way up. So when you hit people at that long range, they start getting scared and they start making mistakes. And that certainly doesn't mean neglect the other punches. It just means put the priority on getting really good and making sure that these are just as powerful, or if not more powerful, than everything else. Moving on, guys, we already talked about our footwork, being able to step back very quickly, but something else that is very important to get good at is a simple fade back. If somebody's the shorter fighter and they're lunging to get to you, and they're just going to be clipping here because their arms are already that much shorter, they're already working on that distance barrier. Sometimes all you need to do when you see them coming, if you're like, oh shoot, I haven't moved my feet in time, just lean. Once I lean, then I can go back to moving my feet, or I can lean, counter shot, and then move my feet. A little fade back. It's so effective. When I fought Mosab Amrani, very often I would just do a little tip, just a little backwards motion, just, we're not talking massive distance, we're talking about that far. That's all I had to do. And many fighters in the UFC, you'll see them utilize that. They'll be touching, and it's just the smallest little fade back. You have to get very fast at it. The weight just shifts very quickly to the back knee. With my torso, I just do that. That's it. If I go too far, I kind of get stuck because I put my body in this odd limbo position. So very quick, and then I combine that with my knee, and the two of them together are exceptionally fast. And then I just want to get really good at not just doing that by itself, but either coming here, or here, and then backwards. Again, with that idea of maintaining distance, and then if we happen to have somebody who's getting too close, we don't like it, getting our head out of that position where it's in danger. All right, guys, we're halfway through the video. We're trekking through. If you're enjoying it so far, give it a like. If you have not already, get subscribed, and let's move on. Now, something to consider as the taller fighter is not to put all your eggs in one basket. What I mean by that is don't train exclusively that you're always going to be able to maintain this range, because as soon as they get in and now you're in this position and it's a firefight and they're banging away, if you have nothing to give back, it motivates this guy so much. He goes, all I have to do is get to the inside. And this longer fighter has nothing for me. He has no power, no defense abilities. His balance and footwork are off. I can just batter him around. If he gets that feeling, it's going to be a hard night for you, because yes, you might be able to maintain the range out here, but as soon as they get close, you're in this super danger zone. What I prefer, what I've put emphasis on my whole career is, yes, try to stay here a decent amount, but also train lots in here. So if they do get to the inside, I can still bang away and still have them scared. I want them to not be comfortable here, but I don't want them to be comfortable here either. I just want to establish that the worst spot for them is at this distance, but I also want to make sure that I'm 100% comfortable here offensively, but even more importantly, defensively. If you're the taller fighter and somebody's throwing big hooks against you and they're shorter and stronger and you're getting rattled around, that's no good. So try to sometimes just set your weight down, stand your ground, have somebody just throw some bombs at you, and you just work defensively on being able to take it, and then practice exiting after 4, 5, 6 shots. Again, that's not the go-to strategy, but as I already said, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Now guys, from here, this is something basic, something that most people should already know, but you want to get very, very good at using your front kick and your jab as a range control. So if I'm here, I'm at this distance where I can't touch him, but anytime he moves in, I jam him. He moves in, I jam him. He steps forward, I jab him. I'm using this and this, both the limbs off my front. This is my longest shot, especially if I turn it into a Thai side kick, which we've talked about. But I'm constantly making it difficult for this guy to get closer and closer to that range where it's really easy for him to explode in with those short power shots. I keep him out there at that range. I touch him, I touch him, I touch, and I'm always putting those little techniques, those range controllers in his face. You always hear people talk about utilizing the jab. It's the most important technique. I don't 100% know if I agree with that, but I do think it's very important, especially as the taller fighter. And just the same, that front kick will help you maintain that range control. We saw it work so well for Buakaw. Granted, it was one of his best techniques, but whenever he fought a shorter fighter, they had so much trouble getting by that front kick. And if they settled in a little bit too close, just a little bit too close, then he'd fire it in and make them pay. Next, guys, I want to talk about your guard. I want everybody who's taller to get effective at multiple guards. For myself, my favorite is right here. It's tight. It's having everything hands up. And that is very, very good for any in-tight fighting. It's something that has allowed me against the shorter fighters to be very comfortable right here. This is the zone right here where I can stay safe. But another guard that I can utilize as the longer fighter is the long guard. As soon as somebody moves in, I long guard them. It can be two hands. It can be one hand with the other one up. That's extremely effective. The other one that's very effective is not having my hands tight to my head, but having one hand out as a rangefinder, because now the jab only takes half the time to get there, as opposed to this jab, which I usually utilize, but comes straight out, straight back. It has twice the distance to travel. So instead of here, I can also just work this. You see a lot of guys in MMA utilize this instead, especially the taller fighters, because as soon as somebody comes in, they utilize that footwork, they back up, and they push the hands out for the long guard. One type of guard as a taller fighter, I think, is a mistake. If you only get good at this, then what happens is when we end up in that firefight, as we already talked about, you're unable or uncomfortable with this position. You're uncomfortable with being jammed in like you're fighting in a phone booth. So the long arms are very effective, but the short ones have to be good too. Get good at multiple guards as the longer, taller fighter. It will be super effective for you. And keep in mind, you can even utilize low hands. I mean, I wouldn't suggest it, but guys like Sean O'Malley do it very well. They'll just be, I'll go southpaw here so you guys can see my chest, but instead of having their hands up, they go here. Okay, it's not much of a guard, but he can still utilize his lead arm for blocking. But then from here, when he snaps shots up, he's so loose, he's so fast, and then he can utilize his head movement. If you're the shorter fighter, this is a dangerous strategy, but as the taller fighter, you can get away with it. Something to consider. And finally, guys, our last point today for the taller, leaner fighters, because we're talking about maintaining distance, is utilizing the side kick. It is something that I've not pushed a whole lot until I got into MMA and I started going, okay, this is a kick worth working more. But in the past for kickboxing, I went, not very important. But the side kick, because we're trying to keep people out here, side kick is very effective because it is a super powerful technique, and it can cover so much distance in such a quick time. And we've seen many guys like Sean O'Malley, Wonderboy Thompson, Raymond Daniels utilize the side kick. They'll be bouncing around, they just snap in. The side kick is super frustrating, super great at range control, and it keeps people outside and at a zone that you are comfortable with. Again, the side kick, not my favorite by any means. It actually used to be when I did point fighting in karate years ago. It was my go-to thing. I would just stand here, I would wait for somebody to come, and then I just snap it out. I think I scored 50% of my points like that. But as an MMA fighter or somebody who's just wanting to become more proficient in the gym, the side kick is very, very effective, especially when you combine it with a long guard, a backwards movement, and then the side kick. If you're not fast enough, somebody approaches and you're going, okay, I can't get the defensive side kick off, then you can very quickly push back and then defensive side kick. Or even better, you can bounce and become very effective at covering distance and throwing that side kick as the offensive technique. So guys, we have 8 points there. I hope you enjoyed each of them. I hope these help you in some way, make you more effective as a taller, leaner fighter who might not have the muscle mass to compete with people blow for blow. That's what we're always talking about here when we're thinking about fighting with our physique. It's about fighting smart. Guys, I truly appreciate everybody who made it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the content, please give it a like. If you haven't already, get subscribed. Train hard, guys. I'll see you back here soon for another video.